Good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is Joel Rosenthal, and I have the privilege of serving as president of the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. And to begin, I want to recognize the entire team at the United Nations University for their partnership in organizing today's event, especially Rector Marwala and our moderator today, Dr. Fournier-Tombs. I'd also like to express my sincere gratitude to one of our panelists, Vilas, Dhar, president of the McGovern Foundation, who is not only a visionary leader on questions of ethics in AI, but also a great friend of the Council. Thank you for your support. We're also pleased to welcome to the Council Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Secretary General of the ITU, along with the co-facilitators of the Global Digital Compact, UN Ambassadors Chloe Malambo of Zambia and Karin Eneström of Sweden. Thank you all for joining us. I should also mention that we're being joined online by over 500 people in 75 countries, and that's thanks to the work of Kevin Maloney and the entire Carnegie Council communications team. So thank you, team. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you all out there for watching. Guided by our mission to empower ethics in international relations and informed by the upcoming Summit of the Future, today's event is part of Carnegie Council's Unlocking Cooperation program, a series of convenings exploring new pathways to revitalize multilateralism. Like the Council's founder, Andrew Carnegie, those who crafted the UN Charter were both realists and idealists. These visionaries understood that in the practice of international politics, power and ethics are inseparable and must be considered together. Only then can we create the conditions necessary to tackle shared global scale challenges. Despite this trying moment for geopolitics, it's my strong belief, as evidenced by the very individuals in this room, that the UN can still serve as a powerful force for good in addressing the moral imperatives of today and tomorrow. With that, it's my privilege to welcome to the podium the Undersecretary General Tshilidzi Marwala, the Rector of the UN University. Welcome.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This is actually my second time coming to the Carnegie Council. The first time I came was to introduce myself to Joel. And of course, as part of the introduction, we decided that we were going to do a joint event together. I'm quite happy that a few months later, we are here. As we stand on the eve of the Summit of the Future, we gather today to explore how AI can be a powerful tool for addressing the world's most pressing issues. AI has the potential to bridge the gaps, transform industries, and contribute to sustainable development in an unprecedented ways. This distinguished panel, including ambassadors and our leader who has been a pioneer for AI for good, and it has to be for good, and it has to be for all. Can ensure that these technologies benefit all people, not just the privileged few. Today's panelists, all leading voice on AI governance, remind us that AI should not exacerbate existing inequalities, but must serve as a tool for global inclusivity. I believe that through AI for all, we must address the digital divide, particularly between the global south and the global north, where data gaps can undermine fair and equitable applications of AI. It is especially fitting to discuss AI for all here at the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs, a place dedicated to advancing ethical discourse on global challenges. As AI continues to shape our future, forums like this are crucial for ensuring that AI development and governance are aligned with the principles of fairness, equity, and justice that are enshrined in the Declaration of the Human Rights and the UN Charter. AI literacy is absolutely crucial, and education is key to ensuring that AI is used responsibly and ethically. If decision makers and practitioners understand both the potential and the limitations of AI, they will be better equipped to use it as a tool for solving complex problems from climate change to poverty, not as a tool for destruction. At UNU, we are dedicated to educating the next generation of AI leaders by equipping students with the knowledge and tools necessary to engage with AI in a responsible and inclusive manner. In this regard, we are going to be launching our new AI Institute in Bologna. So by offering research, policy recommendations, and degree programs, UNU is helping to build the capacity needed to navigate the opportunities and challenges posed by AI. This work is essential to ensuring that all nations, regardless of their level of technological development, can meaningfully participate in all the good things that come out of AI, if I were to paraphrase Doreen. Global cooperation is critical for governance of AI. Addressing the governance challenges of AI requires cross-border collaboration. It requires education and changing behavior. It requires putting incentives so that AI is used for good. It requires building institutions that are going to govern AI. It requires policies and regulations, and ultimately it requires new forms of laws. So this idea of educating the policymakers is actually not a luxury. It is absolutely a necessity. At the heart of our efforts to responsibly manage AI risks is obviously the International Scientific Body on AI. I see, Vilas, that the report is out. I think the big challenge is actually the implementation. How do we ensure that all these good things that member states have endorsed can play a crucial role in ensuring that absolutely no one is left behind? So it is therefore imperative that we prioritize development of robust, globally accepted methods to measure AI risks, ensuring that we understand the full scope of AI's impact, from economic disruptions to ethical concerns. While this is a complex and challenging task, it's not one that we should shy away from. As the Summit of the Future approaches, we must focus on how AI can help achieve the sustainable development goals, whether it be for climate action, for gender equality, or for peace and security. And as far as I'm concerned, the issue of data is very important. Cross-border data that has bearing on sustainable development must actually be allowed. And of course, the safety concerns must also be addressed. So the responsibility to guide AI development in positive directions falls squarely on the shoulders of the international community. We must take a proactive stance to ensure that AI technologies are developed in ways that uplift humanity, protect human rights, and promote global well-being. The Global Digital Compact offers an opportunity to create shared principles and norms that can guide AI evolution toward ethical and equitable outcomes. And these processes at the international level must actually be harmonized with what is happening at the regional level. While we have the Global Digital Compact, the African Union has just adopted the African Digital Compact. While we have the high-level advisory body on AI, the European Union has just adopted the AI Act. And if these initiatives are not harmonized, we actually lose the opportunity of governing this technology efficiently. In line with the upcoming summit, today's conversation should inspire us to think critically about how we can collectively ensure that AI empowers all nations, foster equality, and addresses the global challenges of our time. And lastly, please, if you are in Tokyo, please come and visit the United Nations University and let's have a conversation. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. It's genuinely such an honor to be here today and to welcome you and have the opportunity to moderate this dialogue on the future of artificial intelligence, taking place right now on the threshold of the Summit of the Future. Today's panel will discuss the nuances and the impacts of artificial intelligence on global governance, as well as recommendations to global policymakers making decisions today as they make critical decisions on the future of AI. We are very fortunate to be joined today by 4 very thoughtful and experienced global leaders who have each played a key role in shaping the current approaches to mitigating AI risks and harnessing its opportunities. Today, we will have 1, maybe 2 rounds of questions for our panelists to consider, after which we will open the floor to questions from the audience. Without further ado, let me turn to our first 2 speakers, Ambassadors Eneström and Milambo. Your Excellencies, as co-facilitators of the Global Digital Compact, you have had unique insights into the potential of AI to revive multilateralism. As we approach the Summit of the Future, do you still feel optimistic about the future of international digital cooperation? And what positive or negative effects do you think it might have on global multilateralism more broadly?
You guys. She takes the hard questions all the time.
Thanks, Shula. Thank you so much, Eleonore, and it's a pleasure for both of us to be part of this panel. This is actually a very crucial day as we are approaching the Summit of the Future on Sunday, and I think most of us will be busy from tomorrow with ministers arriving, and we are in the last stages, hopefully, of agreeing on the Pact of the Future with the annex of the Global Digital Compact. So please be with us and send your good wishes to all of us during this crucial days that remain before the summit. I also want to say that I think our work has been really facilitated by the fantastic work that is already being done within the United Nations, and especially by Doreen and the ITU. And we have spent a lot of time traveling. We've been to Geneva many times, and Doreen has actually been a support all through our process. So I just want to make that clear from the beginning that there is already, of course, a lot of work that is being done in the UN system, not least by the ITU. So I think our work was very much to pull these threads together and see that we put something that is a comprehensive framework for adoption by all member states. So I would say, yes, I am optimistic. I am optimistic because I know that there are such strong forces within the UN system and elsewhere. I am optimistic because this has been a process that has been going on for 18 months, and it has been a truly inclusive process where we have had so many discussions with a range of multi-stakeholders, from the deep dives that we did with 500, 600, 700 participants, where the civil society, private sector, the UN family were on equal footing with the member states. And I think it's also been a very positive process because there is a real need. We feel that there is a real need to have this agreement. The SDGs were mentioned, and of course we know, and I'm always using what Doreen says about if we use the digital tools in the right way, we can push the implementation of the SDGs by 70%. And this is where we are. We are at a crucial time when we can choose if we want to have a more equal world or if you want to broaden the inequality in the world. And we need to use the digital tools, including artificial intelligence, to bridge those gaps. So I am optimistic. I agree with the rector that the challenge will be the implementation. But again, I am very confident with Doreen at my side and the UN organizations and of course other multi-stakeholders that we will have to push this implementation, especially when it comes to the artificial intelligence and the governance of artificial intelligence, which will go to the General Assembly for further discussions and decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just add to what Karin has just said. But let me just thank the Carnegie Council, UNU, for your collaboration, and of course ITU, and of course the high-level advisory body, upon which a lot of work that we looked to was actually from the report itself. Congratulations on the launch that is taking place this morning. Yeah, so positive, yes, I do join in, the positive outlook of the GDC and in multilateralism because of this moment. We are at a very critical moment. If you look at just the way technologies are advancing, whether it's in quantum, whether it's in AI, whether it's in even in the infrastructure side, you look at the size of the microchip now is really becoming a microchip in the real sense. We're talking about sizes that are nanometers, and that's going to change a lot. So we really stand at an inflection point of technology and development. And if you look at the world over the past 1,000 years, especially the last 200 years, our level of development has been tied to the level of technology, right? It's what defines it defines the level of income that we have in the different countries. And on that basis, you can also argue that the inequalities in technologies across countries also defines the level of inequalities. So we have an unequal world, right? A fragmented world. And at the same time, we don't have a unified system that governs these technologies more at a global level. And the AI platform is one of the first that really looks at it as a truly global intervention on an aspect that is absolutely critical. So it is a very important moment, like Karin has just put forward. In terms of the process, like she said, it was inclusive, it was transparent, but it was difficult. It was difficult. But the difficulties do not compare to the level of challenges that are out there. We're talking about countries that, like mine, which are lagging behind. We talk about 2.6 billion people who are not connected. And that doesn't compare with the differences that perhaps we're having in a room. And so on the net basis, we feel positive about the outlook. Now, when it comes to the issue of multilateralism, to a large extent, it really sits on the inability for us as various countries to close what I call the empathy gap. We need to have more empathy among countries about our various situations. And that it in itself rests upon a deficiency in appreciation or understanding of each other's cultures or situations. So how do you close that, and how can digital help to close that gap? From my perspective, just my perspective in the corner here, I think if you look at it in terms of like a reaction function or theory of change, you're seeing that could the digital collaboration create greater awareness of what's going on across countries? Could it enhance understanding between cultures? Could it create a smaller gap between empathy, understanding and exchanging information on how we live or how they live? And that's not just we and they, it's actually us, it's our world. So when you close that empathy gap, I think in terms of foreign policy, you tend to find it easier to understand and find positions if you have greater empathy on the other side. So I think digital can be a force for greater empathy. Important issue is the caveats that the professor put across, that we need to have the safeguards in place to ensure that it was used for good and for all. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. It's really heartening to hear about both of your optimism and in a way your trust in this very inclusive process. And to really think about AI also as a potential for reducing global polarization and increasing our, faith in universalism, which is something that's really at the heart of the UN. So thank you for that. Turning now to Secretary General Bogdan-Martin. ITU has played a leading role in shaping the global AI governance landscape, from the AI for Good conference to global standards and the numerous technical and policy initiatives in member states. What is your perspective on the future trends in AI developments, and what challenges might the UN system address after the Summit of the Future?
Well, thank you, and good morning. Thank you, Joelle and Professor. Always nice to see you. It's great to be here this morning amongst such a distinguished panel. I understand we're sort of the warm-up act. After this, we're going to get deeper and deeper, and it's going to be an exciting couple of days. I think picking up on what the Ambassador Karin has just mentioned, I mean, I too am an optimist. I think AI can be for good, for all, it can benefit humanity. I like that Churchill expression where he says that the pessimist finds difficulty in every opportunity, and the opportunist basically finds, or the optimist, I should say, finds opportunities in every difficulty. And I think we have huge challenges, but we have incredible opportunities. When we look to the future, AI is going to keep moving faster than we can, and so we have to be able to balance and make sure that we're not pushing for sort of over-regulation. We're not stifling innovation, but we're finding ways to balance risk and find ways to manage safety concerns. So that sort of speed is going to be a trend that will continue. I think the other trend that we're starting to see is how AI is also converging with other technologies. So if it's 5G, if it's 6G, if it's the Internet of Things, if it's quantum, and that also brings new opportunities, but new challenges, I think, that we'll have to face. And again, thank you for using my 70%. I think really a trend, and this also comes to the point about implementation, definitely we see that AI can be used to help accelerate every SDG and 70% of the SDG targets. And so we have to be, I think, investing there. Post-summit, I think your point, Professor, on implementation is critical. We have to be focusing on implementation. And again, that's where I'm optimistic, because there's a lot there. There's a lot there that we can build on, but we have to double down and tackle the gaps. Of course, the biggest gap is the access gap. So whether it's access to computing resources, whether it's access to infrastructure, the digital divide being 2.6 billion people that are not connected, or whether that gap is the skills gap, which is absolutely critical. And we see in so many cases that we're connecting people, but without the basic skills, without the more advanced skills, it can't be leveraged. And so I think we have to be focused very much so on the skills piece, whether it's capacity development, also for policymakers, as you mentioned. We're launching, and we're quite excited about it, an AI skills coalition, and we're trying to tap into that policymaker gap, as well as sort of the public at large gap. And so we're hoping to bring a number of partners within the UN system, but also outside the system to address that gap. I think the other piece, and this comes to harmonization, which has been mentioned by the previous speakers, on the standards front. And standards is kind of the basis to build guardrails. And so we need to do more on harmonizing standards. This is a space that I think ITU has well occupied for many years, not on its own, but in collaboration with other standards making bodies. So we have something called the World Standards Cooperation with ISO, IEC. We have a specific effort focused on multimedia authentication, on deepfakes. This is a big issue. So we're very focused on that space. We also have our first ever AI Standards Summit, which is taking place in a couple of weeks in India. on the margins of our World Standards Assembly. So we're looking forward to strengthening that standards piece, because standards has to be kind of the basis as we look forward to further strengthened guardrails. I think the other piece that we have to be looking at when it comes to balancing innovation with kind of safety concerns, and also making sure that we build in, and I look to my friends now, more than one, in the back of the room from OHCHR, like, let's remember to keep the human rights piece also at the core. I think that's absolutely fundamental.
Thank you very much. Staying in the vein, I think, of optimism, Mr. Vilas, Dhar, I'm thinking now also about your role as a member of the AI Advisory Body, which just launched its report this morning. You've always been very optimistic about the potential of AI to address the SDGs, and we've spoken a lot about them. The AI Advisory Body makes a number of really concrete recommendations that really should be and need to be considered by global policymakers. Could you tell us a little bit more about what is at stake in terms of really adopting these recommendations?
Thank you so much, Eleonore. Good morning, everyone, Your Excellencies, dear friends. What a joy it is to begin to kick off this intense week with people that you admire and respect so much. Doreen, Your Excellencies, of course, Professor Marwala, Joel, in an institution that I think is thinking about not just AI as a technology, but about the ethical considerations of it. You know, this morning we released the UN's high-level advisory body's final report on AI, and I assume I could tell you plenty about what is in pages of documents that's built on tens of thousands more. But instead, I'd love to share with you what I have learned this year. One of the great privileges of my professional role is I get to spend a lot of time in communities meeting with policymakers and technologists, but also always carving out time to meet with students, community members, farmers, philosophers, thinkers. And I have been struck by the fact that in my conversations just this year, from Spokane to Spearfish, South Dakota, from Vientiane to Ulaanbaatar, from Lusaka to Stockholm, every conversation that I have on any topic at some point will have a question about AI.
Yeah.
It has captured the public imagination. It has created a universality of a linguistic construct, a space for us to ask questions about AI, which inevitably become questions about access, about representation, about participation, about ownership, about opportunity. I meet with young people who say, you know, I'm in school and it's all of the things that you might imagine about a rural last mile environment. And yet I went on YouTube and I learned about what an LLM might let me do. And I'm interested and I have an idea. Mm-hmm. There's something about this that's easy to forget when we think about policy as a construct of legal mechanisms or governance. When we think about technological innovation as a construct of code or compute, that at the end of the day, this is a moment in time where, at least in my lifetime, I'm able to engage with a topic that everybody wants to be a part of. And in that starting point then gives us an opportunity to come back to all of the topics, not merely in the Global Digital Compact, but in the Pact of the Future, to ask questions about how we actually design a future that works for everyone. We sit in an institution that talks about empowered ethics. I say often that we too easily attempt to define ethics as a technological mechanism. We talk about ethical technology or responsible technology. We talk about technology for good. To me, none of those hold weight. Ethics is a human function. The decisions we make about technology require human responsibility and ownership. And the outcomes that we define have to be defined by human aspiration. I share that with you as framing as we go into the next few days to bring sort of a civil society context, a human context to the work we all do. There are very important milestones ahead, from the ways in which we in a multilateral context begin to come together to, as we continue to say, to constrain risks and explore opportunities, but in much more fundamental ways to think about how we re-envision what a process is by which we make decisions about a set of tools that will fundamentally change the human experience. In that frame, in setting that moral compass, in setting an ethical outcome for a participatory way to define this, we then come to what are the tactics necessary in order to get there. And here, the high-level advisory body report puts forward some constructs. I think in many ways, and it's very important to note, those are built on the incredible work of institutions across the UN system and across the planet that have been doing this. Doreen, I look always to your visionary leadership of AI for good, starting well before AI entered the public discourse in the way that it has, to institutions like UNESCO that I think under the leadership of incredible folks like our dear friend Gabriela Ramos have created mechanisms for global majority participation and broad-based ownership of building national AI capacity. And thinking about the new institutions that are necessary. The report puts forward a number of constructs and forms, I think with the intention not that they are definitive requirements for a future, but crystallizing moments that let us ask fundamental questions. How do we bring together a deep, nuanced understanding of the scientific possibility of these technologies in a way that can inform all of us, not merely policymakers, but broad public discourse? How do we create forms and functions that normalize and harmonize the incredible ecosystem of activity that's happening around the world? How do we create coordination mechanisms that say that even as this work will happen at scale, there are elements of this conversation that will require the participation of multilateral international institutions? That say that if governance is not our moral aspiration, it is still a necessary outcome. And that governance cannot happen without participation from technological innovators, but also from communities at the front lines of this work. I'll close with this. You started with a question that I absolutely love, and I think that all of us on stage here own the idea that we are optimists. Yeah. But optimism doesn't happen in a vacuum. To me, optimism is guided by the capacity and possibility of technological innovation, deeply informed by our ethical norms and the ways in which we make decisions. And finally, and maybe most importantly, a belief that human systems, human resilience, human aspiration can guide the many, many possible outcomes to those that actually create a better world.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that you start with the the importance of keeping in mind the human experience. And having worked as a data scientist for the last 10 years, it's really now in the last 2 years that AI has really become mainstream and really something that is at the heart of what many people around the world worry about when they think about climate change and the economy, and they look towards AI, hopefully to help with this and not to increase inequalities and add additional risk. And that's what's at stake, I think, for us now. You've spoken also about coordination, and we've had really intense discussions at the UN about other complex governance mechanisms, such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and its impact on developing a common global understanding of the state of the climate. So in parallel, we have in the GDC the International Scientific Panel on AI, which also would aim to develop continuously a common understanding of AI, its risks, its opportunities, what's coming up, new trends and challenges. What do you think might be the best form and function for this panel, and maybe what pitfalls should we try to avoid? And this is really a question for all panelists.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and very good. I just want to start from the anchor of mechanisms that was raised very well. On the issue of implementation, it's going to come down to having robust mechanisms, all right? Having the right mechanisms in place. And it's important that we go through, once the GDC finally goes through, we're very hopeful to go through in the next few days, and would want many stakeholders to endorse it. Once that process goes through, the next thing is to look for the components in there, which are the clear commitments. And the GDC is very clear on several commitments. What are the mechanisms? How can we translate those commitments into active mechanisms? Now, one of the mechanisms is clearly the recommendation that came out of the AI report, was to have an independent panel on AI, and to also have an a global discussion, a global forum to engage that, and possibly some areas for implementation in terms of capacity building. Now, some of the pitfalls that we must not fall into is whereby we have insufficient representation in these mechanisms. They need to be truly global. They need to reflect all the voices that are impacted or contribute to AI. They must reflect even those developers who are not yet developers for AI. Large language models must represent all the voices. So it's the issue of also language. There should be no gaps. So it's those key issues that We usually see in the existing mechanisms that we have in other sectors, including finance, whereby the representation does not reflect the true character and diversity of the world. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest issues. The governance thereof, the independence of the panel is going to be a key, very important thing, so that the information that is coming out of the recommendations truly reflect the voices of many, especially those who are not sufficiently represented. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ambassador Eneström.
Well, I agree very much with what Chula said, but maybe just a few points. I think first I want to really congratulate you for the report, and also saying how important that report and the work that you have done and the contacts that we have had with you all through this process has been for our work. And of course, we build very much the proposal. It's not yet agreed, but I mean the proposal that is there on the scientific panel very much on your work. And I think what Chula is saying on the inclusivity is extremely important. I mean, we are looking into, you said that AI comes into all conversations. I mean, we look into one of the challenges for the future. Of course, AI brings with it a lot of opportunities, but there are also challenges, and there needs to be an inclusive process in taking decisions on the future for everyone when it comes to artificial intelligence. So I see that the scientific panel, which will of course need to be decided in the General Assembly, and there will be a lot of discussions about that. I mean, it has to be a truly scientific, it has to be inclusive, but there also has to be a link between what is being discussed and what are the policy decisions by member states and others. So I think that link will also be important, and that's of course in your report.
Thank you.
But I mean, I totally agree with the ambassadors. I guess I would just add, in terms of independence, impartiality, I think is also critical for this panel. I think it will be important that the panel is multi-stakeholder, that it's representative of all sectors, as AI cuts across all sectors, so multi-sectoral. I would say also multidisciplinary is going to be critical. And then it has to be representative of, like globally represented, so we don't exclude certain groups. And so I think that kind of composition will be critical. I think when it comes to sort of pitfalls, coming back to your question, we should be careful about constructing something that gives the appearance of one size fits all. I think there needs to be elements of agility. I think we also have to be careful not to reinvent things. There's a lot, as has been mentioned before, that's happening that should be leveraged for this purpose. We have, as you know, our interagency working group within the UN that the ITU has the pleasure of co-leading with our friends from UNESCO. I think that group has made important contributions to the panel and to our co-facilitators, that they could continue to offer inputs to such a panel. So leveraging what's there and being careful not to construct something that is not representative of the real needs that we see today.
Mm-hmm. I might actually ask one follow-up question a little bit on that. The idea that you don't want it to be one size fits all, which of course makes a lot of sense. And I think ITU and the UN has really been supporting the development of local AI ecosystems and so on. How do you see that translating in the outputs of the panel in terms of the reporting and the research and so on?
I think we don't want to vote. Do you want to jump in? Go ahead. You go ahead. As being on the panel, I defer to you.
I mean, a couple of things I think are worth noting here, Eleonore. The first is, let's acknowledge the social construct of where we are getting information about AI today.
Yeah.
And recognize that despite the distributed centers of excellence that are all across the world, where new models are being developed and new foundational systems are being set up, we are still subject to the whim in many ways of a small set of voices who happen to be the loudest in the room, who are motivated as much by commercial outcome as by scientific research in what they say about what AI can do. And this cannot be how we make good policy at scale, right? Let's start by acknowledging that science sits apart from the puffery of commercial needs. Okay. Let's also acknowledge that as dominant as parts of the world are with their kind of great little names attached to them, with silicon something attached to it, there is incredible scientific capacity across the planet that needs to be a part of the global conversation. And I think in many ways, I'm just re-saying what our excellencies have shared with us, but the idea of inclusivity here is not a moral value, it's a practical necessity. It's a critical need to get good scientific information. What do our current research agendas around AI empower us to do today? And what are the expectations we might have of what comes next? To be honest with you, and I'm a computer scientist by training, I've spent nearly 2 decades in this work. Today, I don't even know that I can go to a single institution where I feel like that incredible, comprehensive, scientific, research-driven view is easily apparent to me as an everyday citizen. Now, that's not to say that it hasn't happened, and there has been incredible work from standard setting, from use cases and exemplars, and from great scientists who have stepped forward. What an incredible opportunity then for the UN to take on the role of saying, let's actually bring the intersectionality of human innovation science to policymaking. Let's do it in a multi-stakeholder setting that says this isn't a conversation merely about AI, but as you said, Doreen, about AI as it intersects with experience and scientific inquiry across any number of domains, and build a structure by which we can build a credibility base for public discourse all across the world. Like that, I think, is the underlying intentionality here. Now, as always, we come to execution. And I think to try to do this from whole cloth would be an absolute mistake. We know that the mechanisms exist where we're able to source this kind of expertise and build multilateral forums for engagement and discussion of standards, of techniques, of mechanisms. We have to figure out a way to integrate what that incredible landscape looks like into something that's cohesive and productive. I think that is the challenge ahead.
Thank you to all panelists. I think that the theme today is optimism and inclusivity, certainly. Inclusivity in policy making about AI and inclusivity in the AI economy. And I think we all have felt firsthand the opportunity also of AI to reach people that might not be part of the global conversation, for example, through translation algorithms or through moderation, deliberations, and things like that. And also having a broader group of people participating in the AI economy really means that tools that are developed can be much more unique and much more appropriate and adapted to the Sustainable Development Goals than if it's just a small group of people working on them. So I wholeheartedly agree. I think I will turn now to our first intervention. So we have our colleague here from Scott Campbell from OHCHR.
Thanks very much to the Carnegie Council and the University for bringing us together. And it's a pleasure also to kick off or have this warm-up event with such a good, I think, balance between optimism and realism. Mm-hmm. And ambassadors, our best wishes do go out to both of you as you bring this process to a conclusion on the GDC. I wanted to pick up quickly on three points that I think have already been made very eloquently. And the first one is implementation. Mm-hmm. And just the question of how we implement what now is a high-level advisory body report, how we will implement a global digital compact, mm-hmm. Hopefully that will be available very shortly to all of us. That question of how, I think, is crucial, and whether we're responding to needs of so many people, especially those most marginalized, the 2.6 disconnected that the ambassador mentioned, and even more that are perhaps not yet connected to electricity. How we implement, I think, will be crucial, and that is going to be a very heavy lift to see that indeed, as the Rector said, that AI is really for all and serves good for all. Secondly, I am optimistic, and I share Doreen's optimism on that when we see great difficulty with that heavy lift. Because we're not starting from scratch, we do have a roadmap. The Rector also mentioned the need to have robust and universally agreed to frameworks that can give us safeguards as we do develop, govern, and see AI used in real people's lives. So we have the human rights framework, we have good language in the HLAB report that references the universal human rights framework, and we have a GDC that also gives us language around human rights. That will be a very heavy lift. But thirdly, my last point is just on the importance of partnership in making that leap.
Yeah.
And we, as the UN Human Rights Office, have benefited enormously, being one of the smaller parts of the UN, but from our partnership with many of my UN friends in the room. And Doreen, you've been a champion of human rights in this space. Thank you once again for stealing one of my talks. Not the first time. We hope not the last. Partnership will be crucial, I think, in really coming together. We have a universal framework that can guide the development of safe works. But this, I think, will be really important, and in particular in the follow-up mechanisms. And looking at that scientific panel, there is so much work to do, again, as the Rector said, about informing policymakers, informing legislators, informing the people that would create really those guardrails for how AI is developed. That, I think, will be crucial. And we look forward to partnering with others and making sure that the panel, the dialogue, the standards exchange, and hopefully, I think, again, will be a key piece to follow up. That human rights and people's human rights are really at the center of how those are all developed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. We now turn to questions from our online audience. And Alex will ask us our first question.
Hello, thank you. Lots of questions in the chat. One is from Kathleen. They ask, how mature is the data governance structure in the world which is needed in order to achieve this AI for all vision, given that data is the main ingredient for AI? What can be done to ensure and support this foundational data governance structure, especially from the ethics perspective? Another question is on environmental concerns related to AI and how that can be addressed.
Those are two very good questions. So maybe why don't we can address both. So we have data governance and environmental concerns of AI,
All right.
and it's open to all.
Let me just maybe quickly just respond to the issue of data governance. I think the Rector put it very well. There's a divide we have in the space, in the data space. Not all countries have equal access to data. Some are more users, others are more consumers. So we have a very imbalanced system, and we are at risk of having the data divide translating into a development divide. It's a real thing. AI rests on the availability of data. So biasness in data also translates into biasness of the model. So it's a very important component. Are they mature enough? I think there's work to be done, especially in ensuring that the various data governance systems are interoperable. And that's what we talk about in the GDC, to encourage that we have a system that encourages interoperability among data governance systems. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. In the case of Africa Union, the Africa Union just rolled out a model for data governance. And I think it really helped countries in trying to strengthen their governance frameworks, because that acts as a template. And then we see also in Asia, they're making advances, I think, in the Asia region. And so we need to have those data frameworks ultimately come together. Also, I think it comes to just data as a data economy. There's a rush by various countries to house and host data centers. And that's another whole different story. And housing data centers requires that the right environment is there. You need to have the right energy supply there. Countries like mine is going through a drought crisis. We're facing 17 hours of power cuts a day. So you have 3 to 4 hours of power. How can you attract a data center like that? I think it's an issue that was raised. We need to invest in infrastructure. You know, we can't have AI if you don't even have the data or the electricity to run a computer. So it's a real issue. And at the same time, we have this situation where data centers also consume a lot of energy and a lot of water. And it's an issue that I think we need to sit down and really look at how much consumption of natural resources are these data centers taking. So I don't have the how per se. Maybe my other esteemed panelists can do that, but I think it's worth highlighting that this is a concern, and we need to address it.
Yes, agreed. Yes.
Can I just add to the ambassador's point, which I completely agree with. So we have put together something called the Green Digital Action Coalition, and we're quite excited because under the COP presidency this year, Azerbaijan, COP29, They have picked up from UAE with continued focus on the impact of digital, including AI. And so they'll have a specific ministerial piece that COP29, and I think this is important because it will bring the constituents together to look at how AI and digital technologies as a whole can reduce the impact on the environment and tackle the reality is the impact currently is negative, but it can also be beneficial. So how can we get constituents to come together and make commitments to reduce their impact? One other piece I wanted to mention, picking up on Scott's point about implementation, definitely partnerships will be key. We have our Partners to Connect coalition. We're targeting 100 billion by the end of 2026. We're at 51 billion in commitments, and it's about connecting the hardest to connect, and that also has a big focus on AI. So we have to double down on that. Thanks.
Incredible. I'll add one additional nuance to that question. We often talk about data governance. I think there's another element that we should consider, which is just what is it that we are collecting data on? Too much of the conversation focuses on building the infrastructure to allow for competitiveness around a model that we have today of commercial data. But let me ask you all to do an exercise. Go online and see in publicly available data sets how much you can find about rare earths mineral deposits in frontline kind of environments. And I promise you will be able to find quite a lot. Deeply granular data that gets you down to incredible resolution, shows you exactly where they are. Now I'll ask you to do a second exercise. Go online and in those same geographical environments, look for what data you can find about potable sources of safe water at surface level. And you'll find there's a marked difference. You won't be able to find very much. There is a model in which we collect data because it's commercially available. We then think about the governance of that data, the availability and the competitiveness of national models. We need to have the other side of that conversation, which is the responsibility for governments, for public actors, for philanthropies, for commercial actors to invest in collecting the data that actually reflects data about vulnerability and guides us in solutions to the SDGs. And that recommendation needs to sit in multilateral constructs, but also in national constructs as well. I just wanted to make sure we added that.
Of course, of course. Ambassador Eneström, do you?
No, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's easy when you have the discussion, and I think we noticed that in the beginning, that it's easy to sort of forget the environmental and climate part of the whole discussions about digitalization and artificial intelligence, because you see all the advantages and the positive side of artificial intelligence, also for the climate issue. But I think it's extremely important, and this is why we have put the environment and climate as one of the 12 principles in the document, because of course, as Chula said, the energy consumption, the climate and environmental footprint is very much there, and this is a true discussion that we need to follow up. And let me just acknowledge also the OHCHR, because we have had good, very good cooperation with you both here in New York and in Geneva. And of course, the human rights has been upfront and is one of the principles. And so the human rights and the human dimension of the GDC is of course key.
Thank you. So now we have a few minutes, and I'm happy to open the floor for questions. Yes, the first hand here.
Francesco Lapenta, the director of the Institute of Future Innovation Studies at John Cabot University. So this is a kind of a momentous moment. It feels we are opening something that we have been waiting for a long time. But I also feel that there's a lot of people that are looking from afar that are very much aware of how complex this process has been. And although optimism is naturally the right mode, I think there's also the duty of being able to scrutinize what has been done. So I'm asking, as a friend, a question that is a little bit personal. What do you think went lost in the process because of the complexity of the negotiations right now? Because in my view, when I see the different drafts, I've seen language that has been taken out that was fundamental. And people are observing and scrutinizing the work, and they're noticing. So the question for you is, what is the one element in the work that you did that didn't make it and you thought should have been there? Thank you.
Good question. We'll take a few more questions and maybe do a round afterwards. Yes, please. And then I'll turn to you in the front after.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very illuminating, and I much appreciate being here. I'm Chloe Schwenke. I'm the president of the Center for Values and International Development and an ethicist. I am delighted to be in an ethics center here, and I want to ask an ethics question as an ethicist with an observation to frame it. And the observation is that AI does not have inherent moral sense. We still depend on human beings to bring ethical judgment and discernment to the processes and outcomes of AI. How is this going to be structured into the development of AI in such a way that that moral discernment stays a part of this process, not just in human rights, as important as that is? As ethicists, we use 7 or 8 different moral frameworks to find appropriately sophisticated moral recommendations and advice. What do we do to make sure ethics in the broadest sense of applying values is really a part of this whole equation moving forward?
Thank you. We had a question in the front.
Yes, not a question, it's more comments. Thank you. So I'm Dima Al-Khatib. I'm the director of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation. Thank you very much for such a rich discussion, very important. I just want to bring 2 elements here because we talked about the means of implementation and the importance of bridging the gap. And South-South cooperation and triangle cooperation present themselves as innovative mechanisms to address that. So a plea to make sure that as we move forward with setting the means of implementation to ensure that that angle is captured. I will not dwell a lot on what we can offer, but there's a lot of platforms that we can put at the service of making sure that the recommendations get implemented at the country's level. One of those is also an initiative that's called the Global Thinkers, and it's a network of policy and think tanks from the Global South that can definitely influence and support the evidence-based support, but also support the governments at the country's level, at the regional level, to make sure that AI is implemented ethically and in the right ways. The other thing is also, let's not forget the importance and the influence of the UN system on the ground. In every country, we have a UN system with technical capacities, and they will be definitely a key channel to make sure that this is linked to the national development planning and to advancing that at the countries and the regional level. In previous assignments, we had collaboration also with ITU, for example, in undertaking digital assessments in countries that has helped in shaping digital strategies, that has helped moving forward and so many other things. So the UN system on the ground is definitely a powerhouse to really support that process. Very much with the issue of inclusivity and to bridge the gap north-south. This is a demand, not only in terms of access and connectivity, but also to make sure that they are empowered, the voices are heard, and they are part of the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're coming up on time. And so I'm very aware of the busy schedules of the co-facilitators and all of our panelists. So what I will suggest is maybe we go one by one and maybe offer some brief concluding remarks and answer some of the very interesting questions from the audience.
All right, thank you very much. Very quickly, I'll respond to the question on what was lost in the process. We started off committing to a very ambitious outcome, and would want to say that parameter for the co-facilitators, we really challenged the member states to keep it ambitious. And for us, that was like a bar which we didn't want to cross. Of course, in the process, so it's a multilateral system, and therefore not everybody will agree with the first cut. And therefore, as we go through various iterations of the document, some things get lost. The level of ambition did come down a bit, but we really tried hard to make sure that we kept it strong. One of the issues I would point out is that we maintained the follow-up mechanisms that are there. We still have a high-level review in there. We still have a report in there that the SG should produce. I mean, we tried to really maintain some key things in there. What was lost, perhaps, is something I would call a dashboard, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were proposing a dashboard so that you can easily track how we're progressing against the various targets. So that's probably what got lost in there. But by and large, I just want to acknowledge what you have put forward. Indeed, we need to have many organizations come forward, look at the documents and say, how can we mainstream these into our processes? How does it align with our preferences as an organization? How can we move to a point where we can actually implement these things? But let me close by just acknowledging somebody who has worked hard on the Global Digital Compact and multilateralism at large. My co-facilitator here is leaving her role at the end of the month. And so I just want to acknowledge you publicly.
Thank you. Very briefly, and this is the best co-facilitator and partner I've had. Yeah. Very, very quickly. I mean, I don't think we actually lost anything except what Shula said. I think we have kept up the ambition. Maybe what we have lost is that we were, from the beginning, very keen to have really concrete commitments that were also measurable. And these, I think, some of them we had to let go. That's, I think, it's. But I feel proud that we were actually able to keep the ambition, even if we had wanted to have a more ambitious document from the beginning. I think the ethics and the human dimension is really, really key. And I mean, the human control over the artificial intelligence is in the document, and that is, of course, something that goes beyond the GDC. It's very important in the GDC, but it also, of course, comes into military domains and other discussions that is done with when in other parts of the pact of the future. Just want to agree very much on the importance of national implementation, and this is also why we were so keen to have real commitments by member states in there, and commitments that we still think are measurable, and that there is a true, as Chula said, a true follow-up section that we were able to keep. So this is not one document that we agreed to and we put it on the bookshelves, but I know Doreen and others will make sure that this will be implemented. But the national, the commitment by member states when it comes to implement it towards their own citizens, that's really, really key.
Well, let me take this opportunity to commend both of you and congratulate both of you. I think it's been a heroic undertaking, and sitting in Geneva, none of us have envied your task, which was almost an impossible task. And I think I wouldn't focus on what's not there. I think what's there is important. And the fact that there's recognition about the divides and the need to close the divides, the recognition of the importance of having an inclusive digital economy, the importance of safety and security, critical. We see cyber attacks increasing 80% year on year. The importance about the data governance piece, and of course AI, the need for an AI governance framework. And I think it captures those important elements that we have to address as ITU, but as the UN system, and I think as the global community. And we saw so clearly during the pandemic what happened if you were not connected. And I think the GDC and what it's articulated tackles some of those big issues. Of course, when it comes to implementation, we will all work together and double down and figure out the right path forward. But I think it's important what is there, and really I thank you both.
Thank you.
And of course the ethics pieces are critical.
Mm.
We often push for ethics like by design when it comes to standards making. This has been a big focus of our training that we give our standards groups to put this at the core, as well as the human rights principles. So thank you for that. And definitely when it comes to in-country, working with the RCs, working with the country teams is going to be critical as we look to implementation.
The last word to Vilas.
Yeah, let me acknowledge the quality of the questions and comments in this section have set a high bar for the week. I appreciate both questions. And at the risk of being maybe slightly more provocative than I'm supposed to be, let me take a step outside of my UN hat and let me answer your question quite directly. I think that in all great human ambition and aspirations, they start first from the idea of what's possible, and then it is whittled by human dynamics and politics and all of the other elements that lead to consensus-based decision-making. I am incredibly proud of what I see as the frameworks that have come both out of the high-level advisory bodies report and what I aspire will be in the GDC. And yet I think a responsibility exists then for all of us to ask the very question you've asked: what was left out and why? What does it tell us about the world we live in? How do we bring accountability to the process by asking why these ideas weren't brought forward? Where are there opportunities for civil society, for academics, for other institutions to take on parts of what was left on the cutting room floor? But also to acknowledge that in a conversation about AI is many multitudes. Conversations about the geopolitics of the world we live in, about the world we will create, about how countries and regions are interacting with each other. And there is an opportunity here for great public participation, for people to step forward and to ask exactly the questions: why did we end where we did? And what does it tell us about how these same engagements might go in the future? I'm still being perhaps moderating myself a little bit, but let me just acknowledge the opportunity that sits in that space. And let me also tell you that some of my favorite ideas and thoughts maybe are not in the form that you might expect them to be, but to me that doesn't in any way erode my hope that those possibilities might come about in a different way, in a different mechanism. Let me just quickly come to this ethics question, because I think you are asking really the foundational question that we should be talking about. And it's the contours for an hours-long discussion and really, I think, great study. But let me say one thing, which is, we started talking about how ethics is a human function, that AI and the tools that we build should represent those. But let me also acknowledge that in an aspirational sense, AI will fundamentally change some of the assumptions that have driven the creation of our moral systems. Assumptions about resource scarcity, about how we view abundance as a possibility, about how we allocate resources and how we let people engage in participatory processes. I think there is a vein of academic and intellectual study of moral experience that asks the question: what happens when those postulates that drive our social systems change? How do we build new ethical and moral constructs that guide us through that process? With zero answers, I simply want to acknowledge the importance of the question you've asked. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, we're going to wrap up this really insightful panel. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists for your insightful comments. Good luck for the next round of negotiations and panels that you will be on. I really learned a lot, and I appreciated the opportunity to be here with you today. I also want to thank our audience for your thoughtful engagement, your attention, your questions. I know you had many more to ask. And thank you to UNU and to Carnegie for having us.